What is love and what does it look like? That is largely the focus of conversation here today as we journey through this short story. Welcome to Strip Cover Lit, where we squeeze the bigger picture of literature. I'm Adrian Fort, and we are here for a video that will appear in three separate playlists here on the channel. Number one being the short story discussion playlist, number two being the George Saunders playlist, and number three, a short story by short story read along of 10th of December by George Saunders. So, pardon me. What are we getting into today? There will be three parts of this video. A So What Happened recap of the video, a literary criticism portion of the video where we talk about the ins and outs of this short story, and finally a writer's corner where we talk about some of the things that we can take from this short story and integrate into our own writing. So what happened in this short story? Well, we have Marie, who is with her kids in the car, and she's trying to relate to them and failing. But the attempt is there because Marie's childhood was spent with a dour father and a mother who was shameful, and we learn through the course of this story, neglectful. Marie, wants the love of her children, so she's taking them to get a puppy. Surely they'll love a puppy, and by proxy, they will be loving their mother in the process. Cut to Callie, who is waiting for the arrival of Marie and her children, and she's watching Bo. She is waiting to give them the puppy or sell them the puppy, and Bo is a handful. We know that because of the circumstance in which Bo finds himself. And if Marie doesn't take the puppy, Callie's guy, Jimmy, is going to have to put the puppy down. We think Jimmy is going to have to shoot the puppy. Marie shows up and is aghast at Callie's living conditions, afraid even that her children are going to get pink eye just from being in the house. And when Marie looks in the backyard, she sees Bo on a harness and leash. She becomes incensed, remembering her own mother's neglect, and tells Callie that she and her children will not be taking the puppy. Then Marie becomes resolved to call Child Protective Services on Callie and get Callie's child Bo taken away from her. Callie then takes the puppy to the middle of a cornfield and leaves it there. So we will get into the literary criticism in this piece. And here's where it starts, in my opinion. Where are the fathers? Where are the men in this short story? Now, I'm not meaning to make this short story, which includes basically exclusively women, and make it about men. That's not what I'm doing. But there is in this short story a large revolving around people who are absent. Absence, neglect being one of the key drivers of this story. Neglect, perhaps, being the opposite of love. So in this short story, we have Marie, whose guy, Robert, is not present, but he's talked about. We have Jimmy, Callie's guy, who is all too quick to want to dispatch of animals, and they are both mentioned, but they are not in the short story. They're not here for the action. Even the puppy's father is absent. We have the puppy's mother rubbing her butt all over the carpet, etc. But the puppy's father is not in this short story either. He is gone. So the absence of that portion of the adult relationship, we have the children present. We have Bo and we have Josh and Abby, although Callie seems to have two other children who are not present in the short story. These are dynamics of relationships that are going to really pour gasoline on the short story that we get. Callie is searching for Jimmy's love and is willing to do unspeakable things in order to make sure that Jimmy still loves her. Marie is maybe not searching for Robert's love. He seems sort of aloof, does Robert in his relationships. She is really searching for the love of her children, and she is doing so in ways by providing things that are maybe not facilitating her relationships, her loving relationships, in the way that she would hope. The next thing here to talk about is the dynamic of wealth versus poverty here. This is a larger discussion that happens in society, that happens on a personal level, where you have probably heard the term affluenza, which is children of wealthy parents who don't feel love and take bad ways out of that situation. And people on the outside look into these relationships and say, that kid had everything. How could they turn to drugs? How could they turn to a life of crime? How could they ultimately end the self? All of these things that come out of oftentimes relationships where things are present, but love seems to be absent, or at least love in the way that would be fully communicated to the child in those circumstances. We also have some um, judgments passed on to Callie through Marie in ways that are not passed through the narrative, but passed through the individuals in question. Callie in this story has no money, but she has so much love, quote unquote, or so many loving things that she might have to kill some of it. Marie has comfort and a standard of living, but she is trying to collect love. She is trying to consume love. So when we look at this short story, there is a maybe larger discussion to be had through that communication of love and what that looks like to individuals in these dynamics. Marie trying to collect love from people by providing things. Callie, who is present in her relationships but is absent in ability to provide. So there is a larger sort of conversation to be had there. And if we look at the title of the short story, Puppy, the puppy is the fulcrum from which this love may or may not happen. The fulcrum through which Callie has to dispatch a thing which might love her, that puppy, through dependency, but she does not have the means to provide, so she has to get rid of. Um, sorry. When we step further into this short story, the idea of love as it is presented to us. Callie seems to be in an excess of love. Marie seems to be constantly trying to garner love. She feels she does not have enough. In this way, Callie is the one that has wealth, and Marie is the one who is impoverished. But what is love? Well, if you have the standard print collection, we have a definition of love on page 43 coming to us from Callie. Callie struggles with her weight. Um, but she is passing this along. She was never going to be really slim, but Jimmy liked her the way she was, and she liked him the way he was. Maybe that's what love is, liking someone how he was and doing things to help him get even better. Doing things to help him get even better rather than trying to provide the things. We have the judgment passed along from Marie to Callie and her family when she is asking, do we really want this puppy? It comes from this circumstance. She says to herself, okay, then, all right, they would adopt a white trash dog. Ha ha. They could name it Zeke, buy it a little corn pipe and a straw hat. She imagined the puppy having crapped on the rug, looking up at her, going, "Can't help it," mocking the lower class here. But no, had she come from a perfect place? Everything was transmutable. She imagined the puppy grown up, entertaining some friends, speaking to them in a British accent. My family was of origin was rather not, shall we say, of the most respectable. This is the judgment. So here's a thing that could possibly be in the writer's corner, but I'm going to go ahead and talk about it now. This is judgment based on wealth, judgment based on socioeconomic class, which is translated to Marie as inability to love. The lower class are unable to do X, Y, Z. There is a so the judgment, however, comes to us through not the narrative, not the text, but Marie. One of the things that is maybe infinitely disappointing about a lot of the writing you will read, a lot of the stuff that you will get today, is that judgment is based straight through the narrative. No, we don't know that this is how George Saunders feels about people of the lower class. In fact, we have a much more robust definition, a much more well thought out definition, a much more fluid and understandable definition of love that comes to us from Callie, the judged character in this portion of the text. Marie is passing this judgment, but Callie's the one that gives us an actual usable definition of love. It might be flawed, it might lead to killing things, but it is what this character finds a working definition of love, something that you would imagine Marie not being able to understand that Callie feels. Marie is trying to buy love, in effect. Is she right in doing so? Is Marie understanding that love does not always look the same? We have her passing judgment on Callie, who has her son strapped to a tree in the backyard. But we get this to end the story. Callie, who has already communicated the own imperfections in her relationship with Jimmy and the fact that Jimmy is not perfect, says this of Bo. Like Bo wasn't perfect, but she loved him how he was and tried to help him get better. If they could keep him safe, maybe he'd mellow out as he got older. If he mellowed out, maybe he could someday have a family. Like he was there now in the yard, sitting quietly, looking at flowers, tapping with his bat, happy enough. He looked up, waved the bat at her, gave that smile. Yesterday, he'd been stuck in the house all miserable. He'd ended the day screaming in bed, so frustrated. Today, he was looking at flowers. Who was it that thought up that idea? The idea that had made today better than yesterday? Who loved him enough to think that up? Who loved him more than anyone else in the world loved him? Her. She did. That is how we end the story. Now, this is an imperfect solution, tying your child to a tree. We even get the Marie calls him simple, calls Bo simple. We don't know that in the confines of this story. We can maybe assume that he is. We can maybe assume that he is not, that he is just a troubled child. Now, this sounds like he is perhaps dealing with a health issue. It sounds like he has, if not behavioral issues, he has a disability. But we don't know that. Callie not only assumes that, not only quote unquote knows that, But also, she is so convinced of it, she's going to call child health services, and maybe she should, right? Maybe she should. But he seems to love where he is at. You can be a prisoner and in love with your circumstance. That doesn't mean it's right. The ideas of love that are passed through this story are hard. They are flawed. No one finds themselves in a perfect circumstance. The ideas of love that are passed through this story are imperfect and maybe abusive. But if there's a but to be had there are efforts, right? The motivating force in this story is love for both Marie and Callie. Neither of them seems to be making the best decisions possible. Marie drawing criticisms even from her own mother that her children are spoiled, Callie tying her child to a tree and leaving a puppy in the middle of a cornfield. Rough stuff here from George Saunders. The the ideas here, the practices taken out through the characters are hard. They are things that do not translate well when you are trying to implement them in your own life. But it does help to have frameworks for what love is, what it should look like, and we get those from these characters. The takeaway on a personal level would be to be mindful of the construction of love in your own life. I'm trying to find where I am here. I apologize. So, yeah, I think that's pretty much the conversation to be had from love and what we're doing here. Now, moving on to the writer's corner portion of this discussion, I want to start with the excerpt from page 37. Callie and Jimmy are sharing a moment of intimacy. So, how do we build the idea of love in our writing? How do we build the idea that our story is more than a story on a page, but that it involves real characters, and these characters' real lives are applicable to your reader, to your audience? Well, it's through authenticity. Authenticity can be communicated through intimacy. On page 37, we get this excerpt as Callie and Jimmy are getting through the moment where Jimmy had to put down the cat. And then, because she hadn't made his life harder by being a smartass, they had lain there and made plans. Like, why not sell this place and move to Arizona and buy a car wash? Why not buy the kids hooked on phonics? Why not plant tomatoes? And then they'd got to wrestling around. She had no idea why she remembered this. He'd done this thing while holding her close, bursting into this sudden laugh, despair snort into her hair, like a sneeze, or like he was about to start crying. Jimmy, through much of this short story, through Callie's perspective, is built up as being this hardened man who, when he has to make the decision to put an animal down, by God, that's what has to happen. And here, in this moment of intimacy, it's a weird little moment, right? Where she doesn't know why she remembers the thing she remembers. She doesn't really maybe even want to be taken back to this moment with Jimmy and her. But that moment between Jimmy and her, though it came in the light of something so horrible, was intimate between the two of them. One of the ways, The Art of Fiction by, oh man, I'm not going to remember his name, but The Art of Fiction is a very good book if you are trying to learn how to write. John Gardner, The Art of Fiction by John Gardner. There's a place in that book where he says that if you're trying to build a crowd, you don't tell the reader, well, there was 100 people standing around. What you have to do is paint individuals in that crowd. People who were standing around, individuals. There was a guy in a black and white striped tank top holding an ice cream cone, and the ice cream fell out. All I have to do is say that, and you know the guy in the striped tank top was distracted by something, was aghast at something that he had seen. He is so neglectful of his ice cream cone, the precious ice cream cone, that the ice cream fell onto the pavement. You're not eating it from there. The thing that was his object of desire, he neglected in that moment because of the thing that he had seen. This builds the idea of onlookers. People, a crowd watching the thing that had happened. With intimacy, with a personal relationship, it is very much sort of the same. To build the idea of an intimate relationship, what you have to do is build but one moment of intimacy. Callie on the page feels very real. Her relationship with Jimmy, though both of them are flawed, seems applicable to us, the reader, because we have moments like this where they had. Have you ever laid in bed with someone and said, maybe we should buy a car wash? Maybe we should plant tomatoes? No. But you've had other moments of dreaming about the future like this. Instead of George Saunders saying, we laid there in bed holding each other talking about the future, which is a very boilerplate sort of throwaway line, we have an actual moment of intimacy with strange details. Buying a car wash, planting tomatoes, all of these things that happen on the page that are not applicable to us makes the moment of intimacy applicable to us. We know those feelings. We know those emotions. We know that type of intimacy, getting lost in conversation with someone that you love and making plans for the future. We understand that. And so we understand the relationship between the two. Earlier in the short story, if I can find it, we have a moment of intimacy between Marie and her children. Well, in this family, laughter was encouraged. Last night, when Josh had goosed her with his Game Boy, she'd shot a spray of toothpaste across the mirror and they'd all cracked up, rolling around on the floor with Gucci. And Josh said, such nostalgia in his voice, Mom, remember when Gucci was a puppy? Which was when Abby burst into tears because, being only 5, she had no memory of Gucci as a puppy. So in that moment, not only do we understand more fully the relationship between Marie and her children through the weird act of a son sticking a Game Boy up his mother's butt, we have the moment of intimacy between a mother and her children, and we also understand the desire of Marie in the very onset of this short story. She wants to provide for Abby the memory of a puppy. She thinks that through this, Abby will love her more. Through these small things, these small weird moments in this short story, we understand more fully why the characters are acting the way they are. Suddenly, not only the characters, but the entire short story feels real. When the entire short story feels real, the reader, the audience, is not only more able, not only more likely, but almost indebted to the writer in order to apply the short story to his or her actual life. That's the biggest thrust of literature in general. When you can change a person's world by the things you have put on a page, that is when writing transcends to something more. That is all I have for this short story. If you like or appreciate what it is that I do here, hitting a like button really does help me out, as it tells YouTube to share this video with other literature lovers. If you find yourself here by chance but not design, literature is the only thing I talk about on this channel. Dropping multiple videos a week, so hit the subscribe button, stick around for more. There are videos on your screen right now that relate to this video. Click on one of those, and I hope to have you back for the next one.